Thank you for pressing start on episode 69
Nice.
of Underplayed, KZUM's indie video game podcast. Today, we have 2 secret games, followed by a review of our featured game, FEZ. Here on Underplayed, we review indie games of all kinds, the games with small budgets but big hearts, the lesser-known experiences with imaginative ideas. I'm Bo Poe, but it's not only me. There's a guy with a flow who's on a journey. So won't you put your hands together, please, for the Zeo Drifter, the indie game sifter, the curse-crackin' mister, DiscoCola. What is going on?
You know, I've been seeing the world through a different perspective lately, so I'm having a pretty good day. How are you?
I'm glad you could take that reference for a spin. I'm doing just fine, my golden hexahedron. Those are references to our featured game, FEZ. I just thought of the spin comment, like right on the spot.
Oh, I'm so proud of you. I never would have done that.
It doesn't happen often for me, so thank you. Yes, FEZ is our featured game. It will be the game you hear us review closer to the end, but we've got all kinds of fun things to talk about at the top and in the middle. And you know what? Usually, the second episode of every season, we talk about games we're looking forward to. Upcoming games, we pick a handful apiece, and it's just a great seasonal check-in on upcoming games. I have a ton of fun talking about those with you. We didn't do that for the second episode of this season because that was our guest's episode with Noah Lone, aka Some Humble Onion. And we really needed to keep the top of show short. So we moved that segment to this episode.
Yeah. I don't even know why we scheduled that for the second. It doesn't matter.
No, it's kind of arbitrary.
Yeah.
But it's closer to the start of the season, so it feels kind of fitting. But yeah, this is our opportunity to pick some indie games that are coming out maybe in 2025, maybe it's undecided, maybe there's a date, maybe there isn't, and talk about them a little bit. And all of my games are announced for 2025 according to Steam.
I didn't look that closely on mine, to be honest. I know that 2 of them are they give me the sense that they're coming very soon. So,
and sometimes we hear about upcoming games, maybe with a release window, and Steam doesn't update the store page, or the developer or publisher doesn't update the store page promptly. So this information is, really only being taken from Steam at this moment. So if mine have a release date, I'll call that out. But why don't you start? What is your first game you're looking forward to?
Sure. Now, this is one that I was aware of last season sometime, and I swear I mentioned it, but it wasn't on our list, but it's called Fall Up. You play as this little, like, Roomba-shaped robot with bunny ears named Labby, and the whole, like, deal is that you are bouncing off of enemies to reach new heights and solve different platforming obstacles. So I think there's a lot of really fun momentum, a little bit of Celeste, a little bit of puzzling, a little bit of Donkey Kong sort of pogoing mechanics going on here. So this is one that I'm looking forward to, and I apparently haven't mentioned it yet, but it looks pretty good.
This was not on my radar. This looks so cool. Like, I can't even look at you because I'm looking at the trailer for this. This looks so fun.
Yeah, I don't even remember how I found out about it, but it's been on my wish list for quite a while. And this is one that does not have a clear release date.
Okay. It's a beautiful puzzle platformer. It looks like it's already like far along, and it just looks very polished. So I'm excited for that one too. I have to add that one immediately to my wish list. The first one that I will mention is called Mainframes. This is a game that I was lucky enough to try in a Next Fest, actually this past October. And I haven't really talked about Next Fest, October 2024 edition. So I guess this will be my chance to just quickly touch on some of the games that I played. I was actually sick during the October Next Fest, and I did not have the energy to play as many demos. But Mainframes was one of them. And this is coming out March 6th, 2025. So very soon, actually, when this episode comes out. It'll just be around a month away, I think. So, but the Steam page says Mainframes invites you to meet Floppy, and to browse a clever and charming platformer that plays out entirely within the windows and desktop of a PC monitor. You won't want to press the escape key on this cozy outing. So kind of like Hypnospace Outlaw meets a 2D platformer.
Yeah.
You know, you are looking at a screen and you're guiding this charming little character as you jump between all these windows. And I liked how this game played with the idea of having different windows on your desktop, even in just the short demo that I played. It's really cool. And a lot of it is communicated wordlessly. I love games that just kind of show you things. And no matter what language you speak, you instantly understand what's going on. And I think the trailer shows you that really well.
It's kind of reminding me of the Pedestrian too.
Yes, the Pedestrian, Hypnospace. Yes, I totally see that comparison. And you're jumping into windows and then dragging those windows around the screen. And sometimes you can't, like the Pedestrian, sometimes you can't drag things in certain ways because something on the screen is blocking you. So yeah, it's really cool. I'm looking forward to this one a lot.
Cool. My next one, another one I swear I've mentioned on the show before. This is called Altered Alma. This is one that I backed in the Kickstarter phase. It's a pixel art, mostly pixel art 2D platformer, and it looks really dope. I think all the character designs look really cool. The action looks really great, and it has like this cool cyberpunk sort of setting. So it's an easy pick for me. I've been looking forward to this since the Kickstarter was announced, and I think I'm gonna have a great time.
Yeah, fans of like cyberpunk-ish anime are gonna love this one. I love how we're on a 2D platformer roll here.
I mean,
it's kind of our thing.
It is, yeah.
It's kind of what we're known for. But
there's definitely going to be a few more on this list today. So
amazing.
Let's not call it quits yet.
Well, let's see if my next one breaks that trend. I think mine will break that trend.
I think it will.
My next one is called Morsels.
Oh, this one. Okay.
This one I think was in a showcase or two this past year, and that's what put it on my radar. This is published by Annapurna Interactive. I don't know how that looks in the wake of what's happened with them.
Yeah, I don't think we've talked about that here on Underplayed.
No,
Same with Humble Games. There's something going on there too.
So. It's a long story, but basically Annapurna Interactive as a publisher sort of isn't a thing anymore because of a lot of internal power conflicts and a lot of billionaire BS. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
But I think some of their portfolio that they were working on still has them listed as the publisher. And I know a lot of those former team members have now started to find work elsewhere in the game industry, still mostly as, you know, the team that they had, taking over portfolios from other teams that couldn't quite carry things to the finish line. So I hope that they're able to really find that footing and continue to do what they do best, which is publishing awesome games. But anyway, Morsels. This is an action roguelike game with pixel graphics, very stylized pixel graphics and characters. The Steam storefront says, Morsels is a fast-paced creature-collecting roguelite with a rotating roster of characters to switch between at will. Overcome a clique of killer cats as you fight your way out of the sewers in this unique action-packed journey. What I like about this is it kind of seems like Cult of the Lamb, but grodier somehow. It looks like you're in a place that's just full of sewage.
Yeah, it's less on the bloody side of things and more on the like a Binding of an Isaac side of things.
Yes, exactly. Like you're you know, it's the eating poop side of Cult of the Lamb meets all of the poop stuff of Binding of Isaac. But man, this looks so cool. I want to collect all these creatures. There's a GIF on the store page where it's just flipping through this creature journal, and it looks so imaginative.
Well, I hope that it does well because I would love to play this, and I don't want to, you know, have conflict with you over who gets to play it. So hopefully it'll be a featured game someday.
I could see this blowing up and being one of those big indies of 2025. You know, we're at such a fun point in the year. You could argue it's not fun because we don't know about a lot of games coming out, but it's also kind of fun because it's this big mystery, like what's really going to hit this year? What are people going to talk about this year? Morsels is one of those games where there could be a smaller, sort of more devout crowd of fans, or it could really be a game that blows up like a Cult of the Lamb. I'm not
Yeah.
sure yet. And that's kind of exciting. It's like, what's going to happen? So we'll see what happens. I bet we'll both enjoy it.
Cool. My next one is Starlight Revolver. I'm pretty sure you know about this one. And I think this one's a little bit closer to release. It might even be in early access, but I'm not sure.
It does say coming soon to early access. And, I'm looking at it and it doesn't look familiar to me.
Okay. It's a 1 to 4 co-op action roguelite set in an anime-inspired dreamscape, according to Steam. But just looking at the trailer, you can tell that it's kind of like if Hades and a magical girl anime had a kid, basically. So I'm really looking forward to it because I like all of those things, and the bright colors and character designs in this look really good. And if it can incorporate some online co-op play, then that'll be even better because then I'll get to play with all of my indie game friends, which doesn't get to happen very often.
Yes, I would totally play this with the friend groups. And when you said 1 to 4 player co-op game, I was just like totally in. I'm wishlisting this too.
Cool.
Usually during this segment, it's really just whatever you talk about, I'm wishlisting those 5 games. It's like pretty much guaranteed.
Yeah, that's a good point. I should be doing that. Even though I already knew about Morsels, it does need to be on my wish list.
Yeah,
So.
I could see that one being on there. My next one is another, what I think will be higher profile indie title for 2025. And I think a lot of people already know about this one because it's been talked about for years. This one is called Skate Story, and this is being published by Devolver. So they've got some good resources behind getting the word out about this one. And the description on Steam says, ollie, kickflip, and grind your way through the ash and smoke of the underworld as you take on a seemingly impossible quest. Skate fast to destroy demons and save other tortured souls on your journey from a fragile beginner to a hardened skater. When you look at Skate Story, it is a skateboarding game, but it looks so ethereal. The sky is dark. There are all these like otherworldly colors going on. Your skate guy looks...
you look like you're made of like cellophane or something.
Yeah. So I just am immediately drawn to this look. It is not like another sort of semi-realistic Tony Hawk game, for instance. And there have been other skate games that come and go. I thought Hellskate was really going to hit, and Hellskate really didn't hit. It's still in early access, but when this game came out, it just seems like a lot less people knew about it than I expected. But yeah, I'm just excited to play another skating game. I used to play Tony Hawk games when I was young, and those are really all I've played. I guess I've played the Skate series too, which are more realistic, but it's been so many years since those were coming out. So it's time. It's time for a Skate Story. I think like this is going to hit at this moment when many, many people, maybe hundreds of thousands of people want to play a skate game. So.
Cool. Well, I've heard of it, but I'm realizing now, looking at the trailer, that I've never actually seen it. So happy to have that on the list. My next one is called, let me pull this up so I can read the full title, Mira and the Legend of the Djinns. I believe this was in a showcase, and that's when I added it to my wish list, but it's another 2D pixel art side-scroller Metroidvania, I believe. So, shocker, it's imagine that's on my list. But as the name kind of suggests with Djinns, it looks like there's going to be a lot of like desert sort of theming going on, but there's also in the trailer like forests and Arctic zones. So who knows where this place is going to take us, but the gameplay looks like the controls are really tight. So honestly, if you can have some great pixel art and tight controls, like it's going to be hard for you to not be something I'm interested in.
Yeah, definitely. So there's a demo for this game out, and this demo was promoted during Next Fest, and I actually did play this demo.
Oh, okay.
So you can try this out if you want. The part of the demo I played was very much in that desert setting. And I think it was a little too early for me to form an opinion on it, but I want to see more. I definitely want to see more. And like a Metroidvania is so hard to demo sometimes. So like I didn't get a sense yet of like, what are all the different powers? How does progression look? You can't really communicate that yet. And that's usually what I look for in Metroidvanias. That's why I think about Metroidvanias is like, what does the whole journey look like?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the
yeah.
little bit I played was good, and I'm curious to see more.
Cool. All right, you got another one?
I got another one. It's called Ultimate Sheep Raccoon. This is a follow-up to Ultimate Chicken Horse from Clever Endeavor Games. And the Steam page says, Ultimate Sheep Raccoon is a bike racing party game where you and your friends build the course together, add obstacles and dangerous traps, take the lead with power-ups, and race to the finish. So what I like about this is it very clearly is, continuing the style of Ultimate Chicken Horse, where Ultimate Chicken Horse is this cute, cartoonish 2D game where you're building a level and then you and your friends challenge each other to play through that level, and you set traps for each other. There are tons of game modes, tons of characters you can play as and unlock. What I like about Ultimate Sheep Raccoon is it's not just more of the same. This is a racing game.
Yeah.
So the fundamental gameplay idea is different. There is an element of momentum. There's an element of being on a track, using a mode of transportation that maybe doesn't stop always when you want to. You have to react maybe a little bit faster. And there will surely be different mechanics, different traps, and types of platforms that you can lay down. Ultimate Chicken Horse is some of the hardest I've ever laughed while playing with other human beings. I have cried like with tears streaming down my face with laughter while playing Ultimate Chicken Horse.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. My last one for this section is Abyss. I'm going to say it's Abyss 0, but it's typed out Abyss X0. I never know what to do with that situation. Like the anime, apparently Hunter x Hunter is Hunter x Hunter. I've never seen that. I don't know. Doesn't matter. What does matter is that this is the follow-up to Unsighted from Studio Pixelpunk.
Right.
Yep. But this time, instead of featuring a great top-down-ish 2D pixel art Metroidvania, this is a 3D low-poly game, and really, really faithfully, in my opinion, captures sort of that maybe later PS1 era low-poly. I think it looks super good. Studio Pixelpunk picked up a brand new art style and just nailed it. So looking forward to it. Yeah, it just looks good, and based on some of the items and enemies you see in the trailer, it looks like it takes place in the same planet.
Ooh.
That's
cool.
I don't have any confirmation on that, and that I don't think that we're necessarily androids in this one, but either way, looking forward to it, and the characters look great.
After this game comes out, I'll just be convinced they can do anything at Studio Pixelpunk.
Yeah.
Given enough time and development, they can just pull off any style, any perspective. And we love following the updates behind the creation of games. Studio Pixelpunk gives some really cool insights into game creation.
Yeah, they're awesome, and they even answered some questions of mine privately one time, and that was awesome because I was already fanboying before that anyway. Yeah. And Tiana was just like, yeah, this is how I do this, and it's like, oh, thanks for talking to me.
That's great. Well, we'll learn what it's called, how to pronounce the name as well. I'm sure they'll talk about it a lot, but it's Abyss X0. I'm calling it Abyss X0.
Abyss Cross Zero.
I thought about that as well. Maybe it's that. The last official one in my 5 is called Wanderstop. This is another one that was showcased this past year. This is from Davey Reedon, the creator of the Stanley Parable and the Beginner's Guide, which are games I love. And so I'm always interested in what he's doing because he always does some wild, wacky things, TM, with his games. And on the surface, when you look at this trailer, it looks like a farming sim. It looks like sort of a fantastical adventure, life sim sort of game. But I think there's going to be something else at play. And I remember the first trailer for this having something that made me do a double take at the end. And I kind of want to just not look at anything about this game until it comes out because I suspect there will be something along the lines of breaking the fourth wall or exploring a wildly different genre, an unexpected twist. Those kinds of things are probably at play, but they really want to keep it under wraps for now. That's why Wanderstop is on my list.
We'll respect that.
We'll respect that. And this could be another big indie game. I picked a lot of like what I suspect might be big indies this year for my list.
Okay.
The last game I want to quickly mention is the next game from Hazelight Studios. Just back in December, we had the Game Awards 2024, and the Hazelight Studio director Joseph Ferris got up on stage. He's a very charismatic, larger-than-life guy, and he revealed Split Fiction, which is their next co-op game, and this looks so fun. Now, the reason why this isn't officially in my list is because Hazelight Studios is kind of under EA, or their games are published by Electronic Arts, which is a big company, and we're not sure where this falls in the indie space. It might be double I, it might be double A. I don't know. We start to split these hairs, right? But you and I have played 2 of Hazelight Studios' previous games, and Split Fiction says on the store page, embrace mind-blowing moments as you're pulled deep into the many worlds of Split Fiction, a boundary-pushing co-op adventure. It looks like some of this game takes place in sort of like a prehistoric or more like dinosaur-themed, maybe like fantasy-themed setting, and then the other half takes place in a science fiction, sort of like more cyberpunkish setting, and you're jumping between the two. This is coming out March 6th.
Oh, wow. That's very soon. I didn't realize that.
And I forgot to mention Wanderstop is coming out March 11th. And looking forward to this. I would play it with you. I think we would have fun. Just saying.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too. I kind of want to mention one that is an indie-like kind of looking game, but is definitely not indie. It's a Bandai Namco title.
Sure.
But it's called Shadow Labyrinth. It's another 2.5D sort of Metroidvania style game. Shocker, I'm excited for a Metroidvania. But it looks kind of like dark and gritty, but it also incorporates Pac-Man into it somehow and makes this like dark and shadowy looking Pac-Man thing. And that's kind of been a trend recently where Pac-Man is just like this scary kind of freaky character, because there's that Amazon show called Level Up, I think. And there's a Pac-Man episode, and it's kind of like a dark sort of a world. And Terminal Montage, who does a lot of great video game animations, when he did his Pac-Man episode, it was a Halloween episode, and it was super cool.
Bro, I'm terrified of Pac-Man. Like, just imagine a Pac-Man eating you, you know?
Yeah.
I'd be so scared.
Yeah, awful.
And there's just something about it not really having emotion as it's eating you too. It needs to eat you for sustenance or a high score.
It's just all it does. Yeah. It's just a feeding machine.
I know.
Yeah.
So consider me scared already. And they're already making it darker. Now, Disco, there are a couple other things we need to talk about. We need to talk about a little game that some people might have heard of called Inscription.
Hey, I've heard of that game. I wanted to talk about this because in between this episode and when we recorded Inscription episode, I finished Casey's mod and got the platinum in Inscription.
I'm running to find the trophy sound. Please take your time talking about this.
So yeah, I platinumed it. It took a long time. My PS5 hours say I'm at like 72 hours or something.
Holy moly.
And a lot of that was not oppressive. I just had a lot of fun. Yeah, and Casey's mod is just great. And honestly, early spoilers for episode 11 of this season, but it boosts my score.
Wow.
And if you recall, my score was 9.5.
9.5. So there's only one score it could go to.
There's only
from
one way to go.
So you would, like, if we were scoring it fresh today, you'd give it a 10. That's amazing.
Give it a 10.
Yeah, I guess this is our opportunity now to finally make the Casey's mod has got it going on.
It has got it going on. There's a reason. Let me tell you, there's a reason that one of the stats it tracks in Casey's mod is how many Mantis Gods you pull, because that card is awesome.
That's how you get through? That's
one of the like 2 cards that are like really important for high level Casey's mod stuff.
Got it. Okay.
At least in my experience.
You're like a master. You can give me all these tips now.
I can give you tips, but I still fail most of the time.
And I think it's easier to give tips for Casey's mod in a way because you can't rely on the photograph cards. What's
Yeah,
called?
the death cards.
The death cards.
Yeah, those are hard. It's hard to not have those.
Yeah, but that also means that like it kind of narrows the game so that it's easier to know how to strategize, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
you
like-
know what you're looking for on a run.
Yeah. So that's cool. All right, cool. Well, since you platinumed Inscription, which I probably won't do anytime soon,
Give it to me, baby.
we need to celebrate with a little trophy sound. How about this? Oh,
Give me another one.
You want
another
Oh,
one.
you want it better?
I want it better.
There we
Yes.
go.
I'm back in the death card cabin, and I'm winning again, baby.
I love that. I love that Casey's Mod lets us enjoy that game more and more and more. That's super cool. One thing I wanted to mention very briefly, I played this game before our season 7 started premiering. So I didn't play this recently, but I finally played my other jealous game that I wanted to mention in the first episode of this new season. I played Curse Crackers for Whom the Bell Toils.
Yeah, you did.
I played this a couple months ago, and I'm glad I played it. I really am. And you thought I would love this game. I liked this game quite a bit. This is a 2D platformer that DiscoCola reviewed a little while ago on our show. And what really struck me with this game is how much there is to do, how much there is to possibly miss and then like revisit, the colors, the music, and just like how chunky it is. Does that make sense? Like
I think so, yeah.
like how big the sprites are.
Yeah.
You don't see that a whole lot.
Yeah, it's that people are moving more and more toward really, really tiny sprites, and I'm
Yeah.
not a fan.
I kind of like the big sprites every now and then.
Yeah.
It makes aiming for things really clear. Like it makes knowing what you have to do very obvious. And your character's big, so are the enemies. And it almost feels like things are a little bit squeezed sometimes.
Yeah,
But I kind of like that because you don't always know what's coming up. And so you're just always being surprised.
and I think a lot of that has to do with just like respecting the Game Boy Color aspect ratio, and I think that has a lot to do with it.
And that's another huge part about it is it feels like a throwback game. It feels like a game you would play on a Game Boy Advance or a Game Boy Color. And so, yeah, I liked it quite a lot. I finished it. I did not have the energy to go back and like 100% it, but there were things along the way where I'd be like, oh, there's this whole quest line. I wonder like how I finished that. And then I just ran into a ton of those things where a character would ask for something or give a vague hint about this whole other thread that's being explored in the game. So I thought that was really ambitious.
Yeah, absolutely. And I explored a couple of those because I just couldn't help it. I just wanted to, but I didn't. Yeah, I'm nowhere near completing it. And as soon as I get my physical copy for Switch, that's when I'll start exploring completion on that. Because
Nice.
I played it on Steam, and I'd rather just finish it on a physical copy if I'm gonna get one. You know?
Yeah, there you go. There's tons to do in the game for a completionist. There's a lot there. If I would score it, for me, it's like probably a 7 or a 7.5.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad that you helped me learn about it because I guess it was on my wish list, but I probably wouldn't have visited it as soon had you not reviewed it.
Yeah,
So,
your wish list is probably like 2,000 games deep or something.
I mean, it's over 1,000, I think. It's pretty sad. So we're going to move on. But before we do, if you're listening to Underplayed right now, we really appreciate it and we love you. If you haven't already, we would really love a follow and a 5-star rating on podcast platforms. You can do this on Spotify. You can do it on Apple Podcasts, for instance. It might only take you a few seconds, and we'd really appreciate that. It would help get the podcast potentially exposed to more people. And also, if you have friends who like indie games, it's always helpful to share our podcast with those people too. Maybe they only have passing interest in some indie games, and this could help them learn about more. And we would love that.
Maybe they don't play any video games because everything's homogenized in the mainstream world. So maybe they just don't know that they're waiting for indie games.
Maybe they're disillusioned with the current state of like AAA games, and they're just kind of bored. Maybe they need to try something a little bit more interesting and weird. Then they could try out an indie game that we recommend here on the show. So we would love if you shared our podcast with friends as well.
And I want to take a moment right now to talk a little bit about KZUM. The week this episode comes out, We will be just starting the KZUM birthday fund drive. KZUM is a nonprofit radio station that was established in 1978 on Valentine's Day. So KZUM's birthday is on Valentine's Day. And 3 times a year, we ask for support of listeners here at the station. And while we're not on the air proper, we're not on the broadcast dial most of the time, KZUM still gave us the opportunity to be here, and we wouldn't be here without them. So if you are able and you appreciate that KZUM gave voice to indie video games, not only here, but with Press Start to Listen as well.
Yeah.
We would really appreciate if you just had a couple bucks to spare, if you could head over to kzum.org and just drop a quick donation. And if you do that, it would be super extra rad if you also mentioned Underplayed.
Yeah.
Because whenever you mention a show, we get notified. And it's like, hey, that donation came in because of something we said, or we touched a heart somewhere.
Gives us a boost, and boosts are very useful, and it allows us to just keep going.
Yeah, so we'd love it. We won't be going anywhere if we don't get any donations for KZUM, but it would mean a lot. It would be super cool to see our name on one of those donation emails.
And what I liked about what you said is you mentioned even if you have just a couple bucks, it would be useful. A lot of KZUM's programs and ambitions and the ways it helps the community are possible not because of like one millionaire giving us $50,000 just on a whim.
That person's not out there.
That person doesn't exist. Rather, it is dozens, hundreds of people giving $5, $10.
Yeah, we get a lot of like 15 is a very common one these days.
And that stuff, when hundreds of people do that, it adds up, and it's incredible.
Yeah, so we appreciate it. KZUM.org. You can check out the donation page. You can check out other podcasts. You can check out 2 weeks worth of archived radio shows.
Yeah, a lot of stuff there on the website. Thank you for the reminder on that, DiscoCola. It is time for our secret games.
Secret games. Secret games. I know you're playing without me. Secret games. Well, I'm here to tell you, baby. Secret games. I've been playing too. Secret games.
Ooh. In Secret Games, we each review an indie game we've been playing in secret since our last episode. We don't discuss our picks before we talk about them here during the recording, so I don't know what DiscoCola is about to reveal and review, but let the mystery be no more. Reveal your secret game for episode 69 of
Nice.
of Underplayed, DiscoCola.
My secret game this episode comes from D-Pad Studios, and it is called Owlboy.
Oh!
You know Owlboy.
I do know Owlboy. I've played this.
Oh, have you? I didn't know that you had like played it.
I played it years ago. So like when I was like a PlayStation player during the PS3, and then I sort of dropped off of PlayStation and became a Steam player. That's sort of the era when I played Owlboy, and then I got back into console gaming / PC gaming years after that. So it was during that like exclusively I'm a PC gamer phase.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So you know all this, but Owlboy follows a young mute humanoid owl in training named Otis in the floating village of Veli. Otis is under the tutelage of the stern and hard Azio, is how I'm going to pronounce that. In the beginning of the game, we get a bit of a montage of Otis failing to meet the expectations of Azio, and this effectively sets the tone for our empathy engine for Otis, who is generally just kind of seen as a failure without the voice to really defend himself, while also facing the great expectation of becoming an owl, which in this world is kind of a role that has a bit of like a mystic and mythic history to it. And there also aren't very many owls left. Most of the other characters you meet in this game are humans or pirates.
Yeah, I definitely remember being like the only of my kind, or one of the few of my kind.
I think all things told, there are maybe 7 owls in the whole game that you actually see.
Okay.
But yeah, early in the game, there is sort of this ever-present looming threat of pirate invasion, and this sort of amplifies the pressure for Otis to become a great owl, as well as the pressure on your closest friend in Veli, who's named Getty. There is pressure on him to sort of excel in his engineering skills to ensure that the defense systems of Veli are in working order, because currently they are not. The ever-present threat of the pirate invasion also amplifies the fear present when a series of possible pranks find Veli, and then when Otis and Getty investigate, they eventually find themselves traversing some dangerous and oft unexplored locations, which ultimately unfolds in a world-changing adventure with loads of new friends and perilous discoveries along the way. But yeah, it's an adventure game. You go far and wide across this world. An important note of this world is that all the continents are floating in the air. Basically, the planet is an endless ocean, and all of the land is up in the sky.
Yeah, it basically feels like the Sky Islands from Tears of the Kingdom, for people who are familiar. It feels like that other game you played with Sky Islands for our show. Oh, Vernal Edge?
Vernal Edge?
No,
Oh,
not
yeah.
Vernal.
Vernal Edge is pretty much all in the sky, too. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're right.
it's kind of got that. And it feels a lot like a Studio Ghibli film. The sprites look like if Studio Ghibli made like a pixel adventure game, it would kind of look like this. And just the idea of like pirates, there are lots of pirates and things like that, and weapons like the ones you'd see in this game and in one of those movies.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. As far as gameplay goes, you are a humanoid owl, and so you do have access to sustained flight. You can also spin while in the air or on the ground. This is sort of a deflection move. You can roll while on the ground. You can lift items and throw them. You can lift companions, and they gain access to projectiles. So essentially, you are holding a weapon of some sort. What else can you do? You can sort of like air dash, sort of, just to move a little bit faster instead of just flapping your wings. And you can walk and jump if you're on the ground. And that about covers it. So as for things that I like about Owlboy, here I do kind of have to start with an early dislike. I don't like the default button layout on controller. I did play this on Switch, and I don't like the default button layout. So more on that later. But on the positive side of that, the engine and just being Otis feels great. Rolling, spinning, jumping, and the subsequent flying all feel great. And then when we do gain the ability to use projectiles of different kinds, this feels pretty good for the most part. You always can aim pretty easily at what you're aiming at. There's not too much struggle there. So you always feel good when you are Otis. It's just the button layout that I'll talk about a little bit later that didn't quite do it for me. The next thing I really want to praise is the pixel art in this game. I think it's incredible. Given that we live on a floating world, you might imagine that the scope and like the landscape is pretty vast, and I think the backgrounds all nail it. I pretty much never forget how high in the sky we actually are, and I think it always looks amazing. And even when we're enclosed in ruins and we're not looking at these sky backgrounds, looking at these gray stone ruins is still interesting because there's life to it, there's history to it, some of it's crumbled, it's not just repeated gray textures all over the place. So I really think that the pixel art in this game is really amazing. Characters and backgrounds, but definitely the backgrounds.
Yeah, and I'll share a couple of my thoughts throughout here, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I remember one of my favorite parts of this game was how it looks.
Yeah.
And that's what drew me to it, right? I think a lot of people are drawn to this game by how it looks.
Yeah. And there are even some cinematic moments too that move away from the sprites and just sort of have a pre-rendered still pixel art cutscene, and all of those look amazing as well. This game explores expectation, failure, fear, and forgiveness as topics. And I think it did a really great job exploring these topics at pretty much most times. And ultimately did have me falling in love with most of the characters that we meet along the way. So I really praise it for that as well. Just because I don't always get invested in the story so often with action platformers, which I would say this is mostly an action platformer. So I've also played this game before, but I didn't finish it. I played it for like 2 hours, maybe back in 2018 or something.
Okay.
And then something new came out and I stopped playing it and I never came back to it. And I like I mentioned, this is namely just because I never had a chance to get invested in the story. And part of that is because I don't really care about pirates also as a story element in most media. But now that I have finished the game, I have to say that I did give up way too quickly on this game before.
Yeah.
This story, but mostly the characters, take me on a really heartfelt journey. And at the end of the game, I was met with a moment that did fill me with tears. I can cry pretty easily at times, but there's only so many games that have done that for me. It's usually like movies and music. But this is one of those games that did bring me to tears. And I ended up falling in love with a lot of characters and their journeys, including characters that I didn't necessarily like at the beginning.
Wow. Yeah. So they had arcs. And this game did sneak up on me too, I think. I think the first couple hours I didn't really feel a whole lot for the world and the characters. And then by the end, I was actually really surprised at how much it was tugging at the heartstrings.
Yeah. There's one moment, like I think just exactly halfway through the game that sort of changes the tone of the game. And then there's some just beautiful moments at the end that just really got to me.
Nice.
So
cool.
That's where I want to move into my dislikes, though. Like I mentioned at the start, the default control scheme is something I don't like. Whenever I start a game, I always try to play it as intended. There have been exceptions in the past, like Cuphead. I always change the control scheme in Smash Brothers. And then after Mega Man Zero games came out and improved the button layout for dashing, I changed the button layout in Mega Man X games. Now, in Owlboy, I ultimately didn't change the button layout, but I was very close about a dozen times. I wasted a lot of throwable objects and a lot of time-based rechargeable projectiles just because I was pressing the opposite of the button that it was supposed to be. It was like, I think it should be this button, but it's actually
I think
this
I
button.
remembered struggling with some of those things as well.
So I didn't feel like they were all mapped in a really intuitive way, and I stumbled at quite a few high action moments because it was just like, oh no, wait, that's not the right button. I keep doing it wrong over and over again. Another thing I really didn't like so much in this game is the collectible system. Essentially, collectibles are coins that are collected by finding and flying through a series of rings or finding different kinds of treasure chests. They result in the same kind of currency. And then by collecting more and more of these, you can redeem these for tiered upgrades at a shop in what I would call the third chapter of the game. My complaint isn't necessarily about the collectibles themselves. This game is largely pretty linear, right? So there are multiple points in this game where you're unable to access previous zones.
Yeah.
So at the same time, many zones have some collectibles locked behind obstacles that you can't overcome until you unlock a different skill. So as a result, there's a lot of currency that you can't actually acquire the first time you visit a zone. Now, this is fine when you, A, can revisit the zone at any time, or B, there are only a small proportion of items that can't be collected on your first visit. So this kind of reminds me of my least favorite thing about Spyro 2, Ripto's Rage. Most of the levels can be completed on your first visit. You can find all the gems and everything on your first visit. However, there are some levels that are locked behind upgrades that you get way later in the game. But Spyro 2 only did this to maybe 5 levels in the game.
But here it's happening more.
It's pretty much every zone that you visit in Owlboy that you can't necessarily get everything on your first try. And there are a few too many points where you can't travel back to previous zones.
Are you ever questioning about whether you're meant to get something on the first try or the second? Or is it usually pretty obvious?
Okay, there are a couple of zones.
Something you're like, oh, Like, should I keep trying to get this thing?
Yeah, there are some that you can like see in the distance, and there are some like hidden walls in this game, and you learn
Yeah.
that pretty early. So it's like I just need to hug the walls in the right spot, and I can get it. And then I, run into too many spikes, and I give up, or something. So yeah, and there are like 2 zones that have so many coins in them, and I'm like, this zone doesn't even look big enough to have this many coins.
Right.
Like, where is everything? So it's just a little bit too much and a little bit too linear for this kind of a collectible system, in my opinion. However, I have seen the final upgrade that you get in the game, and it seems like it's worth it. So I
okay.
wish I could have gotten it.
I don't think I got it. Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat as you.
Yeah, but I didn't acquire it. Another thing, this game, like many side scrollers, has a dark level, and I always dislike dark levels, but this one in particular is pretty unfun because you take damage when you're not lit well enough.
Oh no!
Like if you're in too much darkness, you're just taking passive damage, and it kind of sucks.
It's like Amnesia, The Dark Descent.
And then my final real complaint is that there aren't a wide variety of enemy types in the game. I think all said, there are fewer than a dozen types of enemies, not including the boss fights. It's nice to know what I'm up against at almost all times, but it made this pretty expansive floating world feel a little bit too homogenized. Like if I'm going to a continent that's several hundreds of miles away, you would imagine that the life forms that live there are pretty different, but
Right.
they're not.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, anyways. In the end, Owlboy is a game that at one point failed to grip me, and that's not really like a good sign for a game that has a lot going for it as a DiscoCola game, like the beautiful pixel art. That said, I am glad I gave it another chance. In spite of a game heavily featuring pirates and a control scheme I didn't love, I eventually found myself absolutely in love with so many of our main characters, and I ultimately experienced what will surely be one of my favorite moments from this season of Underplayed.
Nice.
I do still have pain points with the collectibles and the control scheme that are hard to overlook, but overall, if a game earns tears from me, and this game earned its tears, that game's going to be remembered. So I do, in the end, give Owlboy an 8.5 out of 10.
Well, Owlby. DiscoCola.
You've been waiting.
Any game that can make you cry, complimentary tears, is going to get a positive score, of course. So I don't know that I have any questions because I remember this pretty vividly. And what I have to say, actually, I don't want to yuck your yum because I think it's really awesome that you had a yum. But let's pretend that this game was a featured game and that we both played it fresh and reviewed it. Knowing what I played back in I think it was around when it came out, like 2016, 2017, 2018, around then, the experience of playing it was so different than what I expected in terms of how linear it is and sort of how shallow it is with its gameplay, that I really didn't feel it as much as I wanted to, unfortunately.
No,
it's
I
a
get
beautiful game. I loved the soundtrack. I loved, falling in love with characters eventually once we got there. But I thought this game was going to feel much more like a Metroidvania where you have more freedom and you play as an owl. You're like flying around.
Yeah.
You can go anywhere, seemingly.
But you really can't.
But you really can't. So if this was a featured game at the end of the season, this might be a front runner for game I don't get.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people love this game. This game seems to have lots of very, very positive critical reception. For me, it just didn't quite hit. And I've spent a couple years trying to understand why. I think those are a couple of the reasons.
Well, you're definitely not alone. When I Google Owlboy, many of the top results are like, this beautiful mess, or I didn't love Owlboy like I wanted to.
Beautiful mess. Yeah. I totally formed a perception of this game, a conception of this game based on screenshots and trailers. And just the DNA of what this game is was not what I expected.
Yeah.
And so when I chose to play this game, I went in wanting to play it because that's the kind of game I wanted, and then it wasn't that game.
Yeah.
And so just from the start, I wasn't doomed to hate it or anything, but I would probably, just to give you a snapshot of my overall thoughts, I'd probably give it like a 6 or a 6.5 out of 10.
Okay. No, I get that. And I played it and hopped off it, and this was like one of my first Switch games. Like I was
Yeah, there you
super
go.
excited to play it.
Sure.
And I was, pretty disappointed when I started back in 2018 or whatever. And to be honest, I wasn't super looking forward to playing this as a secret game.
Okay.
If I'm totally honest, it was just kind of like it's been in my backlog, and I just need to
Gotta get through
check it off the
I'm
list.
so glad you played this.
Yeah.
And also, while you were talking, I was looking up some facts about the game. I forgot about this, but this game first came out in 2016. You know when it began development? 2007.
Oh my gosh.
So this game was in development for around a decade.
Long time.
And I think it was in development for so long that, fans were really hungry about updates on the game. They were really curious. And I think the team started development over a couple times.
Oh, geez. Okay.
And I think this protracted development time kind of has an unintentional synergy with FEZ. That sort of happened with FEZ too. It wasn't in development as long, but people were hungry for details about FEZ when it was being developed. Where can you play Owlboy?
You can play Owlboy on macOS, Xbox One, Linux, Windows, PlayStation 4, and I played a physical copy on the Nintendo Switch.
Wonderful. It is time for my secret game. My secret game is called Minishoot Adventures.
Jealous game.
So this is a shmup.
You played a shmup?
Yes.
Oh,
I did.
I've been looking for an excuse to get a shmup ready to go. I wanted to be the first one that did a shmup.
Have we not had one?
Wait, I don't think we've had
We've
one.
had
We've had
games-
shmup sections.
Shmup sections. I'm looking at you, Balthazar's Dream, for like the entire last third of it. That's a throwback. Anyway, Minishoot Adventures is a 2024 bullet hell / twin stick shooter / RPG exploration game. It was developed by Soul Game Studio and published by Soul Game Studio and Indie Arc. The game synopsis from the Steam storefront reads, quote, "Fly into a charming handcrafted world and go on an adventure that mixes up open exploration with crispy twin stick shooter action. Fight your way from the shiny overworld to the deepest caves, improve your ship, and overcome the dungeon's bosses to rescue your friends." End quote. That's one of the best descriptions I think we'll read this season. I think that says everything right there. This is a top-down perspective game with a very colorful, illustrated look. You play as a ship called a Minishoot. Also, I want to just make the note that the name of this game has
Like a little apostrophe.
an apostrophe after Minishoot.
I don't understand it.
I've talked to friends about this, and my theory is that it's a bullet.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
That's all I can come up with, but that is intentional. That's the name of the game. It's the word Minishoot, all one word, and then an apostrophe, and then adventures.
Yep.
So but we play as a Minishoot, and you have a bunch of friends in the form of other ships. And when you start a new game, you get trapped in this dark crystal when a corrupted presence emerges, and this voice that sort of seems heavenly calls to you, saying, "Search for your shipling friends, retrieve my primordial powers, and restore balance to the great crystal." And so you free yourself from the trap, and you're in a cavern that has projectiles shooting at you, some enemy ships are shooting at you, and there are some obstacles that you can't clear quite yet, but you come across a gun, and you pick that up, and now you can use your right stick to shoot your gun, and you can attack those enemy ships that are trying to attack you. And you press some switches to unlock some doors, and you leave this cave. And as soon as you leave, you rescue your first trapped friend who offers you gun upgrades. And then you find yourself in the center of a giant map, and you must explore all manner of ruins and outdoor areas to find more of your friends. Along the way, you are shooting a lot of enemies. This is a bullet hell. This is not a bullet heck. This is in fact this in fact does turn into a bullet hell, especially during boss fights. And you pick up experience when you shoot other ships in the form of crystal shards. And these crystal shards will collect in this little like canister up in the corner. They do like a little tink, tink, tink thing. And once a full crystal is filled, that's a skill point that you can use to upgrade things like your fire rate and your critical hit chance, your movement speed. There are tons of these. And you get powers like boosting, dashing, super shot, and little assistants that help you fight that you can summon.
Ah, love assistants.
Yes. And you have health in the form of hearts. You can get more permanent hearts by finding these hidden heart pieces. It's a lot like a Zelda game where you're finding like sometimes a full heart container, sometimes just like a fourth of a heart, and you need to find 4 of those. You can find map pieces that show you more of the world on your map screen, and there are collectibles like golden scarabs and spirits that you race in these little race tracks. And the world contains tons of blocked paths, lots of locked doors. It feels Metroidvanian in that way. This game has also been compared to top-down classic Zelda games, and I agree with that comparison a lot. There are 4 main areas and bosses to fight, and the goal is to explore, upgrade your ship, and save all your friends. So this is what I liked about Minishoot Adventures. This is a gameplay-first game, and it feels wonderful to control. This is a twin-stick game through and through, and you eventually get just super powerful in this game.
Love it.
This game throws hundreds, thousands of ships at you throughout the course of the journey, and no play session will have you feeling like you're not making progress. Because you're shooting all these enemies, getting experience, getting those skill points, you're always investing into your ship. So you might be looking for the next place to go, but even if you don't really find the next path you're supposed to explore, you're always getting that experience, and it just feels so good to upgrade that ship. You likely can't upgrade everything as well. So you have to make choices with your skill points. I think you can eventually collect enough skill points to upgrade everything, but I 100%ed the map, basically. Like I got check marks on every location. I found everything, and I still had spots where I could invest skill points by the end. So it is kind of a bummer, but it means also that, you know, there's a little bit of strategy. There's a little bit of decision to be made, and you can freely reassign skill points if you want. So if you dump a bunch of skill points into fire rate, but then you want, movement speed, you can divest, is that the word? You can take those points away and put them into this other thing, and you can just freely do that as much as you want. And I was doing that throughout the game. And the game is constantly evolving through different enemies it's throwing at you. Sometimes you'll have a wave of dozens of really small guys that just take a couple of hits. Sometimes you'll be fighting 1 or 2 huge enemies. There are enemies that leap and try to like jump on top of you.
Oh, scary.
So you're always hit with like different enemies, despite them sort of having a similar approach to how they look. And the puzzles require you to explore a lot. This game at first sight might seem simplistic. It might seem very straightforward or quote unquote casual, but this has lots of nooks and crannies. There are hidden switches everywhere. There are hidden paths everywhere. You'll want to hug tons of walls trying to find things. It feels like you're also encouraged to revisit areas to find hidden goodies after you get some upgrades that happen later in the game. So that's where the Metroidvania part comes in, is you'll encounter, for instance, like these big boulders, and you can't break them. But behind the boulders, you can tell there's a door. So it's like, I know I'm going to break that. And then maybe 4 hours later, you find the upgrade that breaks boulders, and you go, oh, okay, now it's time to re-explore. So that's what's going on in Minishoot Adventures. The game visually communicates a lot, and it barely uses words too. Color is used very effectively in this game to really quickly explain how tough an enemy is. If you see like a tan or an off-white enemy, that's like a more basic version of that enemy. But if you see a dark purple version, that's going to be harder to kill. And you see more of those purple enemies the further you get in this game too. I did have some dislikes with Minishoot Adventures. Sometimes dying can feel quite punishing. You get sent back to the town center when you die. And re-navigating back to where you died can sort of be a hassle. I remember getting just kind of frustrated with having to do a difficult fight, dying, and then maybe going all the way back to the center, and then just having to make that trek back is not always the most fun. There is a fast travel, but it's really limited and it's locked behind considerable progress. And it's only one way. You can only do it when you're outdoors, and then you can only go back to town. You can't go from town to another place.
Oh.
So it only does so much for you. But all told, you can get from one corner of the entire map to the far opposite corner in not too much time. But it's not a straight path. There are tons of doors and zigzags you'll have to make. So sometimes I'd kind of get lost making my way back too. There are a few times where I also wasn't exactly sure where I was supposed to go to make progress. The map does get marked with these signals from your friends saying like, there's a friend you need to free in this general area, go to that area. But getting to that area is not always clear, especially if you haven't found the map fragment for that area. So there were just times like in a Metroidvania where I got stuck in this game.
Kind of reminds me of how I felt in Ghost Song at times, where I was just like, I can see where I need to go, but the map to get there is nebulous.
It is nebulous. That's a good word for it. And that's going to be an appeal to somebody, though. Some people are going to like that mystery and that Metroidvania-ness of it all. Then also the world and the story is very thin and just doesn't grab me. There are these brief mentions of these like awesome powers that you're finding and these beasts and these chosen and unchosen beings, and it doesn't really feel necessary to absorb any of that to enjoy the game. But there are just moments where there's this text on screen telling you this story. I don't really follow it. So overall, there's little about the personality of Minishoot Adventures that I take away. Rather, this is a very fun video game. And it took me about 8 hours to finish it, and I always played for hours at a time because progress is so constant and satisfying. I'm going to give Minishoot Adventures an 8 out of 10.
Heckers.
And it's playable on PC, which is the version I played, and Mac.
All right. Well, I only really have one question that's nagging at me this whole time, and it's, do enemies respawn?
Yeah, enemies will respawn, I believe, but not always immediately. So you can sort of like get experience again as you're making your way back to a place you've been before, which is nice. So I don't know if you saw it as a good thing that the map is sort of like cleared as you go, or if it's nice to have the ability to farm experience, but you can definitely farm if you need to.
Okay. Cool.
But I wasn't finding that was necessary at all, honestly. I never hit a challenge where I thought, I need to go back and just like grind for an hour so that I can upgrade my gun. Rather, I would just make my way back to whatever boss killed me. And along the way, I might refight enemies, get a skill point maybe, and I'm just slowly investing more and more in my ship the more I'm attempting things over and over. So you never have to like go out of your way to go fight enemies that you've been fighting
I like
before.
to have the option if I want to just like overpower myself, which I usually do end up wanting to do.
And I would say like this game is really well designed in that actually isn't the wisest use of your time, because most of the highest experience earning activities will be fighting like bosses.
Right, yeah, diminishing returns.
Yeah, you
and
get
all
diminishing
that.
returns and stuff. So I went in kind of expecting to farm a little bit, and I didn't really, because I didn't see that being a good use of my time.
Well, it'll be a tough fight with Grun, but this very strong chance this is my jealous game for
I
this
think
season.
you would totally love this.
It looks amazing.
Highly recommend this to you. And also, some people might hear the term bullet hell game and they might be scared off. Despite this being labeled as a bullet hell game, this is so much more approachable than other bullet hells. And there are 3 difficulty options to choose from.
Okay.
I played on the middle one.
All right. There are a lot of shmups that I'm like, oh, that looks super cool, but it's a bullet hell. So I'm like, I lean more in the like R-type Darius kind of shmup.
There's leeway with fights where you have the hearts that go away as you get hit. You don't just get hit once and you're dead.
Yeah. Okay.
And then also you get powers like the boosts that let you sort of dash through big bullets. You know, there are boss fights where you're supposed to dash through their bullets to survive.
Yeah,
I feel like.
can see that in the trailer. Yeah.
So there are ways to outmaneuver enemies too. And also this game feels great on the Steam Deck. That's where I played 90% of this game. This game feels amazing on the Steam Deck. And then there's more to do after the main game in the form of like really intense combat gauntlets, I think. And I only played like one of them, but there's a lot of content here. I mean, it's like an 8-hour game. If anything, I'd say it's maybe a little too long for my taste. That might be what's bringing down my score just a tad as well. But it's very fun. I highly recommend it to you. And those are our secret games, Owlboy and Minishoot Adventures. Let's move on to our review of FEZ. It is our featured game. FEZ is a puzzle platformer first released in 2012. It was developed by Polytron Corporation, a startup opened by Phil Fish, the primary designer behind the game. It was published by Trapdoor. The game synopsis from the Steam storefront reads, quote, Gomez is a 2D creature living in a 2D world. Or is he? When the existence of a mysterious third dimension is revealed to him, Gomez is sent out on a journey that will take him to the very end of time and space. Use your ability to navigate 3D structures from 4 distinct classic 2D perspectives. This game initially takes place in a 2D world. It starts in this place called Villageville.
Villageville.
I love that. And if you Google Villageville, this piece of media is not the only piece of media to imagine the name Villageville. I remember seeing that pop up a couple times. But Villageville is a vertical village floating in the sky, and you play as Gomez, a little guy. I don't know what Gomez and its species is. Do you know what? Like, would you just describe Gomez as like
dude?
It's just a dude. Like they're just little guys.
Yeah,
you know,
they're just little guys.
They're just little guys. I don't know what they are, but they're kind of humanoid-ish, but they're stark white.
Yeah, they seem kind of squishy at times.
They
too.
do marshmallowy, maybe. And there's this old man named Geezer who tells Gomez to meet him at the top of the village and that today is a special day. And so as Gomez, you climb up, you meet Geezer, and this giant cube forms in the sky above Villageville and above Gomez. And the cube transports Gomez to a different place and talks to him in this alien language before the cube grants the power of using another dimension. And this FEZ, as in one of those hats, descends from above and rests on Gomez's head, and you can now rotate and change your perspective. And once you do that a few times, the cube splits into many pieces that are like smaller cubes, and the game gets all glitchy and it restarts actually. And it's giving Inscription at this part. I don't know that it's like breaking the fourth wall, but it's definitely going to a very weird experimental place already. And this small cube-like companion named Dot arrives and tells Gomez that he has received a gift and that the cubes must be restored, otherwise the universe will collapse. And Dot points out this door at the bottom of Villageville and says that that door will lead to a world outside the village, but you need to find one of the cubes that this giant cube was split into. And your goal is to explore this whole world, find all the scattered cubes, and you need 32 cubes to finish the game.
That's the game. As far as like controls, I think part of the beauty of FEZ, the controls are pretty straightforward. You can walk, jump, you can ledge grab, which is not in a lot of games, but in this one. And then you can climb on ladders and vines. Apart from that, the only one other thing that FEZ really has, and this is its standout mechanic, is that you can press on PlayStation, it's L1 and R1 to rotate the x-axis of the world. And this will place Gomez in either the front or the back layer, depending on kind of where he's positioned when you rotate. So, as alluded to, this world is being treated as a 3D and a 2D world simultaneously. And yeah, you use this rotating mechanic to find and locate and platform to all of the different cubes, as well as just kind of solve some really nebulous puzzles that are based around rotating in the correct way.
Yeah.
And you can find a lot of clues like that by rotating the world, and they're often notes on walls or markers on statues or other landmarks. Eventually, you do gain access to another new mechanic, but I feel like mentioning that's a bit of a spoiler, so I don't know if we want to mention that here.
If you want to mention it later, maybe we
Okay.
can.
Okay.
I've
It's something I didn't really explore a lot of, I'll say very
I think
early
I know
on.
what it is. Yeah, I think I know what it is. I didn't actually do any of it, but I'm aware of it.
Okay. Yeah, I used it, and that's
Okay.
about it.
You tried it out.
Yeah.
Cool. So you've done a little bit more than I have. Yeah, you get to the point where you're jumping and you're like rotating the world in midair sometimes,
yeah.
which is kind of interesting. So it makes you look at platforming in a new way. And here is where we would talk about the history and significance of the game, maybe by giving a few quick facts. But this game has quite a history, both with what came before and after development. So FEZ's development was highly anticipated, and the game's creator, Phil Fish, became a public figure for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is that he was one of the main subjects in the documentary Indie Game the Movie, which chronicled the creation of three like very noteworthy classic indie games, which were Braid, Super Meat Boy, and FEZ. I saw Indie Game the Movie back around when it came out. I still vividly remember a handful of moments from it. Like 5 or 6 moments from that documentary still are just like seared into my brain. Did you see this movie?
No,
back in the
I
day?
ran out of
Okay.
time. Yeah, I ran out of time to watch this.
Okay. I am actually kind of glad that we didn't watch it ahead of this recording.
Okay.
I had proposed watching it either together or maybe separately sometime before heading into this review. But the more I've thought about it, the more I think I want to just address that some of this stuff happens, and then just remember that this is a game at the end of the day, and we will not be talking about the creator really that much. But I do want to just note that Phil Fish became a public figure as a result of being in this movie, and then also as a result of being at the center of several online quarrels because of making inflammatory comments, both online and at in-person events, and being a target of the Gamergate controversy, to name some of the things. And publicity about FEZ involved all these things sort of reaching a boiling point, and it led Fish to cancel plans for a sequel and to largely leave game development behind. And all these historical points by now are like really far in the rear view mirror. And you can read about what happened, but know that if you do research behind the story of Phil Fish, be mindful that it contains discussion of self-harm and bullying, online harassment, and misogyny. But past this point, this review shall neither be an indictment nor a vindication of the actions of Fish or the people involved. At the end of the day, we have an indie game called FEZ that millions of people have played, and so we're playing and reviewing it for what it is.
All right.
Anything to add to that?
I don't know. I started reading some of all of this, but I ran out of time to finish reading that. I'm
Okay.
very bad at reading.
That's fair.
So
There's a long, detailed account you can read about. But FEZ sold over 1 million copies by the end of 2013. It was met with universal acclaim. It became the inspiration for many games that followed, including indie games like Monument Valley, Tunic, and Animal Well, which is an upcoming featured game this very season.
hey,
I'm excited to
look
talk
at
about that. Yeah. So DiscoCola, with all that said, what are your thoughts on FEZ?
Yeah. This is a game that for a long time, after starting Underplayed, I was like, let's get to FEZ. And then about halfway through our time in Underplayed so far, I was like, I kind of am not looking forward to FEZ anymore.
Why? Expound.
I can't really say for sure. I don't know. I just became less interesting. It kind of, as we've played more and more of these games that came out in like the PS3 era, they don't always like hold up the best, or I'm not loving them as much as I used to.
Yeah.
Or my expectations for them, if I haven't played them, were unmet. So I kind of started putting FEZ in that box at some point.
Yeah, and the further we get from when it came out, the less it's talked about. So the less you might be reminded of it too. That was the case for me. Years ago, I actually did start this game, and I only got like an hour in, and I stopped.
Yeah,
I had
part of it
with Owlboy situation,
yeah.
like something else grabbed my attention.
And part of it too maybe was because like you were like, I got to tell you, man, I hopped off it. Like I was not loving it the first time I played it.
Sure,
so.
yeah. At least I didn't love it enough to just keep going. Not that I hated it.
Right.
It's just something else grabbed my attention.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now that we have played it, I know what I like and dislike about the game, and so I will start with what I like. As I alluded to before, there's a simplicity in this game and its ideas. It tries something unique in the world to help it stand out in the form of rotating the world on its axis, treating the game as 2D and 3D at both the same time. But it has all of the familiarity of the traditional like side-scrolling platformer. So it has a really low barrier of access to the game, but you still get to try something new that hasn't really been explored in other platformers to that point.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of people have played a game that feels like this, like a Super Mario Brothers.
Right.
You know, it feels like a throwback sort of classic platforming game. And I would say, like, even though this game is quite old by now, this idea of rotating the world was not a new thing. Like there was Super Paper Mario that I played on the Wii and things like that. So I was actually also curious to know if this was the first game that you had played that sort of did this.
To my recollection, but you know, you've also got 2D and Top D that plays with like a similar concept.
True.
So it's not the same thing, but it is similar. I like that progress in this game is dictated by item collection. I love item collection, and I want more games to dictate how far you are based on what you've collected. I think more games could do that. As I mentioned back in our Hyperlight Drifter episode in Season 1, I love like hard edges and straight lines that are baked into the world. It's kind of like I'm observing a planet that's in our universe, but the laws of nature are just like totally different. So I really love the visual identity of this game, and being able to like get a sneak peek of where a door might take us that's, you know, in the background. I think that's a nice touch. I really love the visuals of this game. Obviously, that's what, you know, had me interested in FEZ in the first place, was just like this really cool hard edge pixel art. Also, as mentioned in the Hyperlight Drifter episode, the music in FEZ is done by Disaster Piece.
Yeah.
And I love this music.
Yeah. Were you familiar with it before you played?
No.
Okay, so it wasn't a soundtrack that you heard first.
Right.
Okay,
so
nice.
here's the thing.
Okay.
I knew that he did the music, but I always forgot that was the case up until like a week before I needed to start actually playing the game. I was like, oh yeah, it's Disaster Piece.
I was almost in disbelief because it came so much. I guess it wasn't that many years before Hyperlight Drifter. Now that I think about it,
but it does feel like it is, because it's just like a totally different.
It feels
era.
it feels like the end of the previous era, and then Hyperlight Drifter feels like closer to the beginning of the next era.
Yeah.
So that just doesn't feel possible to me.
Yeah, but man, and it's not just because this is, you know, Disaster Piece and I loved him, and like I would play the game and I'm like, oh, dude, this song is awesome. I'd be like, oh, yeah, it's Disaster Piece. That makes sense. So I really love the music. Like, oh, man, there was like this one song that played during this rhythm-based room that I found.
Yeah.
Like that one was especially standout for me. It was so cool.
I want to listen to the soundtrack now.
Oh, yeah, me too, dude. Speaking of the rhythm-based room, some of the rooms hidden in FEZ have some really like fun and incredible platforming challenges. And these were actually some of my favorite moments in the game. Is just like these unique platforming challenges that use the mechanics of FEZ to an optimum degree.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I really loved is when I figured out like one particular treasure map puzzle. I felt really smart when I figured that out. Like, admittedly, I was probably only smart enough to figure it out because there was a similar puzzle in a Mega Man game previously. But when I tested out this like puzzle concept with the treasure maps and it worked, I was like,
Oh, that feels so
yes, nailed
good.
it.
That probably means you were more intuitive in this game with its puzzles than I was, because I didn't figure out any of the treasure maps.
Let's not go that far. I figured out one treasure map puzzle, Bopo.
Yeah, and I figured out none.
There's a lot of other things to figure out that don't have treasure maps.
That's so true. We'll talk about some of those special rooms and solutions and puzzles a little bit later.
And then I love that this game just gets super weird in both the beginning and the ending. It subverts in a way that at the time would have felt super interesting and authentic. You know, at this point, I've seen the whole like glitchy thing a few times now. So it doesn't surprise like it might have back in like 2012 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, that would have been one of the first times I'd seen something like that. And I would have been really impressed and probably would have gone a long way in really hyping me up early on in the game.
Totally. And I think a lot of that stuff was kept hidden pretty well. I'm not sure a lot of that was known to people, even though people were really hungry for details about the game. I think they did keep the glitchy, psychedelic stuff under wraps.
Yeah. I'm going to move on into dislikes here. First up, you mentioned story-wise that the universe will end, but for me, like the game doesn't really consistently present its stakes. So I'm not really invested in Gomez really in any way.
Yeah.
Like, what happens if I don't collect the cubes? I don't really care. I'd
How
like
much time do I have? Yeah.
if I were Gomez, I think I would just be, you know, forgetting that the universe is ending. Like I would be happy just living out my days rotating on the x-axis, just like having this little extra awareness of the world but still living among the people.
He can do something that none of his
Right.
civilization even knows about.
Yeah.
They're not even like aware.
It's like I have a fun little secret, but I'm not that much more special than anyone
That's
else.
true. Yeah,
So
like
I would be totally happy to just live out my days like that.
There are times where corruption shows up on some map screens and
That's
like
true.
you'll get hurt if you touch it, but then you can just leave that room and come back and it'll be gone.
Probably be
It
gone.
sort of like reshuffles it in a way.
So yeah, the stakes they're not very present in the game, and I forgot that the universe was even ending for most of my playthrough.
Yeah. A lot of that exposition stuff is really front heavy.
Mm-hmm.
It's just some really basic sort of dialogue with Dot and Geezer and Gomez, and that's it.
Yeah, pretty much. And you forget about it, especially if you take a lot of breaks playing Casey's mod instead of playing FEZ.
Yeah.
Something else I don't like, and we'll talk more about later, is I can hit a lot of roadblocks really quickly. But yeah, I got stuck a couple of times, and it would sometimes be just like one small thing that ends up opening a lot of doors. But it was just finding that one small thing.
Yeah, you get bottlenecked in this game.
Yeah,
and it happened to me.
That was a big bummer and had me trapped for more than an hour at one point.
Oh, okay.
Another thing is I am often not really having just like this really incredible time in this game. Like I'm not having a bad time, but it's just I'm not having like a lot of fun. Not just because I get stuck, but there are just like a few too many areas that they just don't have enough of those like smaller cubes to collect.
Oh, yeah.
So I think if there were more rooms that had more of these smaller cubes in more of the rooms, that would give me like something to focus on when I'm observing some of these other puzzles that I can't figure out.
I was watching the completionist's video about FEZ, not to bring his thoughts of this game into this too much, but he was calling the small cube pieces cubelets.
Yeah.
Which I really like.
Yeah. I need a cublet snack.
A cublet snack. And yeah, when you find them, it feels so good. It does reach a point where after finding a couple cubelets, you get a drought of cubelets, and then it's just like, you got to find the full cubes, which requires so much more work.
Yeah.
And so in a play session, unlike something like Minishoot Adventures, for example, you might not make as much progress as other sessions.
Yeah.
Especially if you're kind of closer to the 32 cube mark.
And that's kind of where like older platformers that, you know, have coins like Mario, where they're not like worth a lot, but it still gives you something to do instead of just having this stretch of emptiness.
That's true.
So I could use more cublet snacks.
Yeah, and a lot of these games, the coins or the cubelets, whatever they are, the floating shiny things, they are a sense of momentum. They're a sense of direction.
Yeah.
And I loved when I saw the little ones showing up, but it doesn't happen all the time.
It can lead my eye to somewhere that maybe I wasn't observing too.
Yeah.
It's just like,
we've talked about this with ukulele before too, with like the feathers not always being intuitively placed. And it's an art form, how these things are placed in a game. It takes a lot of thought.
Spyro's really good at it. That's something that excels at. But anyways, then my last but probably biggest thing is that I'm not smart enough to figure out some of these puzzles. I had to look up a few things, and that was just to get like the minimum number of cubes to beat the game.
Okay.
So eventually it became like super discouraging for me. This game has like a whole alphabet, and I simply just don't have the time or interest, frankly, to solve it without an internet guide. So now that I am at the point where I am, all of the rest of my progress, I'm probably just going to be leaning on a guide.
That's fair, especially if you want to get like all the achievements or trophies in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely necessary.
So, yeah, in the end, FEZ is a game that I was looking forward to for a long time until I wasn't. And that did eventually temper my expectations, and I'm thankful for that. For the most part, the game holds up today, but I've played so many games that seem inspired by FEZ that some of the greater like revelations that you find don't have as much of an impact. But like I said, it still holds up, so I don't think that should really stop anyone from giving FEZ a chance. At its core, it is a game that is like classically designed in the best way, and when I am collecting different kinds of cubes, I am having fun, and when I am able to make new discoveries, whether on purpose or sometimes on accident, I feel pretty brilliant. But unfortunately, I don't have a ton more to say beyond that. Like, I don't have any like higher overarching praises.
I don't think there's a lot to say about this game at a certain point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
There's
one
a
of those
plateau.
Yeah, it's just one of those more, even though there's kind of a lot going on under the surface, it's pretty straightforward all the same.
I agree. So for me, I give FEZ an 8.0 out of 10.
Nice.
Still overall quite positive, but it's not something that I'm hungry to play a lot of.
Well, Owlboy. Can I say it again?
Yeah, you already did.
Okay, that's great. Well, I'm glad that you had an overall positive time with it. So, on to my thoughts. I thought FEZ was great. I love this game. I think this is a great game. There's not a lot to say about it, you know. But I do have likes. I do have dislikes. I'll get into those now. I think the jumping in this game feels pretty powerful. And at the core of the game, which is platforming, I like how you never feel punished for taking risks, because when you fall a long distance and you might fall into an endless pit, or you might fall too far such that you don't really die in this game, but if you take too much of a fall, you have to reset back to where you started.
This game has fall damage. We haven't said that yet.
It has fall damage.
But
and you reset from where you jumped. And that's awesome. It means that, I don't have to be extra careful around ledges, and you have to jump to and from ledges all over the place in this game. And you are often climbing up and up and up. And where that would sometimes feel daunting in other games, here it just feels really welcoming to just try things. Like, just see if you can jump from this tall platform to this not as tall platform, and will I make it? Oh, sometimes I do. This game is much more approachable than I thought it would be after all these years of waiting to play through it as well. Gathering the 32 cubes for me was mostly a perfect difficulty, despite, like you, getting stuck and requiring a lot of backtracking at a certain point. But the overall average difficulty of the game, I thought was great. I thought it was perfect for me. I think this world is beautiful for all the reasons you've said. It's packed with tons of detail in the pixel graphics. I love details like birds and owls and the rain and grass and all kinds of things
like
in this game.
Little objects on like shop shelves in the outdoor market or something.
Yeah. There are like little cities that you come across, and there are tons of little details that you can examine about people. You can go indoors and see people's bedrooms. and the personal effects that they have in there tell you a lot about who they are too. So everything just feels very thought out in that way. I love seeing the time of day change as well. I love seeing those sunsets. It just feels like a step above what a lot of other games were doing, especially at the time this game was released. I also love the soundtrack by Disaster Piece. I'm just say a lot of things you said. I love the wild exploration of the glitchy stuff, the psychedelic stuff. The end of this game, I think, feels like 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I'll just leave it at that. And I was just hypnotized by the end. And this is a game that makes you wonder. This is a game that invites you to wonder what a symbol might mean, or how certain areas connect, or, you know, what kind of cryptography is going on that I have to solve. You might not want to solve it, but it kind of opened my mind to what a game like this that looks like this can do. And it's doing that all these years later since it came out, which is really impressive. So I think this game holds up incredibly well after all this time. When I get to dislikes, I would just say that the 3D map is really cool as a concept, but I found trying to look at all the different pieces of the map got it in the way of itself.
Mm-hmm.
There were so many times where I was trying to like look at a certain area or room, and there's another map piece that's in the way, and I'm selecting the wrong thing. And you can rotate it and move around.
It, and it gets so confusing.
I get so confused looking at the map specifically. I really don't get confused when I'm playing as Gomez rotating the world.
Yeah.
Which is kind of incredible to me because, like I've said, I'm directionally challenged in things, but I usually didn't get mixed up with what direction I was supposed to rotate. It was just being in that map. Some of the game's secrets are not approachable for me too. Actually, I'll say many of the game's secrets are not approachable. And sometimes it's hard to know what locations to prioritize in the quest for 32 cubes. The map will tell you what rooms are not complete yet. That's really nice.
Yes.
But I don't always know, like, what sector of the general map should I go to get the most bang for my buck when it comes to just investing time into finding these 32 cubes. I don't always know that. The dialogue feels dated and uninspired. This kind of goes along with the not really feeling the impact of what's at stake here. And it's not a huge part of the game, but there is dialogue that's optional in this game, and characters just don't talk in a very compelling way, and the humor doesn't hit. The humor in particular feels kind of dated.
Yeah.
And just kind of thin.
I think that's always going to be the case with like humor in media as time goes on forever.
Mm-hmm. But that's all my dislikes. So overall, I think FEZ holds up. It is a prime example of a game that celebrates secrets while being great for what it is on the surface, in my opinion. I'm going to give it an 8.5.
All right.
Out of 10.
That's pretty close to what I guessed for you.
Yeah.
I watched just like a few minutes of one of your FEZ streams, and I saw your pause menu, so I have a general idea of how this went for you. But how was your quest?
I don't know if that's complimentary or not.
It was super complimentary
really?
Because it was vastly deeper, way more complete than my pause screen, let me tell you. But how was your quest for 32 cubes? Was it like smooth? What did you get stuck on?
We've talked about this already, that we both hit bottlenecks where it just feels like you get so narrow in what you're supposed to find sometimes, maybe for just getting to that 32 number to unlock that final door, that you don't always know where to go. And I just remember two parts where I significantly got stuck. One was at the end where I was trying to get to 32 cubes. And the secrets, the thing that really unlocked things for me there was going higher in the map. Like there's a cluster of levels way high up.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was really missing. I had not really gone up there enough. So I spent all this time lower in the lower areas looking around, and I was getting just like scraps here and there. Like it wasn't enough. I was getting in like the mid 20s, and I was like, this isn't really hitting it. There's a whole area I'm not hitting, and it was way up there. The other part that really tripped me up, this is embarrassing, and this happened publicly because I streamed the game, but in the intro area where you have to find the first 8 cubelets to make the first cube that unlocks the first door. It took me like 40 minutes to find those because I didn't yet understand that when you're in Villageville, when you're opening all those rooms, did you notice that when you open a door, it stays open after that first time, telling you that you've been in that room?
I don't know if I did notice that.
Well, it's a way that I think the game is communicating that although the world is rotating all the time and it might be hard to keep track of where you've been, this is how we'll tell you that you've been to a place already.
Interesting.
And
that helps.
I didn't pick up on it, and I went into the same damn rooms over and over looking for, I had 7 out of 8 cubelets.
Yeah.
It's basically a tutorial area, and I spent like 40 minutes in it. And I think it's designed to be played in like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Super embarrassing. Those are the 2 places where I got significantly stuck. The very end and also the very beginning. So how about you?
Well, when I saw your pause screen, you had like more than 20 of the yellow cubes. At that time, I was pretty close to the end of the game, and I only had like 11. So,
wow.
like, you were like way ahead of me, even though, you know, I had been playing for a lot longer than you had. So I was struggling, and I guess I must have had like a bunch of the anti-cubes or something, because I still don't have as many of the yellow cubes as you have.
Really?
Yeah. I've only got like half of them.
So the anti-cubes are harder to find. They're like purple.
And I definitely used some guides when I got to rooms. I'm like, I know there's something here. I just don't understand it.
Oh, yeah.
So there's like 4 or 5 anti-cubes that I probably didn't really earn.
Okay.
But got anyway.
I think I found like 3 anti-cubes on my own.
Okay.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And I would get to some of those rooms that I didn't understand, and I'd just try it for 5 or 10 minutes, and I'd go, you know what? No. I bet there are enough cubes in this game that I can find my own set of 32.
Yeah.
And I eventually did. And I think my overall number was just like a majority were yellow cubes.
For a long time, I had that mentality, but I was hitting that drought of cubelets and other yellow cubes for a really long time. And I was just like, you know what? I don't have time for this. I want to play other stuff. So I did look some stuff up. And my big moment where I was stuck for a long time was there's this part where you have to lower the water level.
In the sewer or the... Yeah,
just
I think
like,
I know what you're talking about.
It's like it changes a lot of areas in the game. But like I couldn't find the part to lower the water level. And so there were just like so many doors underneath the surface of the water that I couldn't get to for a long, long, long time.
Dang.
And so I kept backtracking and going back and forth and trying to find new stuff. And I couldn't. And I knew that there was stuff under the water. I just didn't know how to get there.
I'm looking at this interactive map. There's a map online where you can see all the nodes and
Can
stuff.
you send that to me?
I can. I'll
Thank
send
you.
it right now. It takes a while to load in. So
It'll be like my Blasphemous experience where I have that map open at all times.
Yeah, and then just speaking on those rooms, what were some of those rooms that kind of stick in your mind? Because I definitely have a few.
I mentioned it briefly, but the rhythm-based room that I found was super awesome. If I recall right, it eventually became like a 2-tone room, essentially. Like you are a shadow on a colorful background or something, and all of your platforms are just like dark black. If I recall right, that's how that room ended up, and that was super awesome. I really loved the rooms that were just like a tall vertical tree.
Oh, yeah.
I found a couple of those, and I really liked those.
Like it's like a forest with like light peeking through the leaves, the canopy.
And it's
Love
just
that.
it's just a room of cubelets, but it's really pretty, and you get to jump really high. So yeah, those I think stood out the most. And then of course, like the lighthouse is a memorable set piece just in the background of a lot of different screens that you explore.
I love how sometimes you see the place you're going like way in the distance, like that lighthouse, and you're like, I want to go there, and then you can.
Yeah.
So cool. I love the graveyard and mausoleum area. This is where it's raining. You see lots of ghosts. There are these graves, and when the lightning strikes, the ghost outline appears next to the grave. I'm getting goosebumps. And when I first noticed it, I felt so perceptive. I was like, oh, that ghost, there's a ghost there. That ghost means something. And if the ghost does mean something, I don't know what it means, but it's a cool little detail if you're paying attention. And those areas also have the platforms that appear. They're invisible platforms, but the water is hitting them and the lightning reveals them. So it's this little moment where you can notice, oh, that's where I'm supposed to jump. Otherwise, it doesn't look like you can progress up anymore. There's this civilization that we haven't talked about called the zoo, the zoo-ish civilization. And it's like the civilization that came before Gomez's people, I guess. And there are these places called the zoo ruins. This is where you can kind of interpret more things about the story. Beyond the thin dialogue that doesn't tell you a whole lot, you can interpret a lot through markings etched on the wall. You can tell that there was a previous people that interacted with some higher beings or some aliens or something. And you come across their ruins. And before I found this room I'm about to mention, I saw lots of symbols that looked like QR codes. And there were 2 or 3 times where I tried to scan things because I thought they were QR codes and they weren't QR codes. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Why would they make it look so much like a QR code? And then I get into this room called the Zoo Ruins QR room. According to this interactive map, that's what they call it. And this is unmistakably a QR code. Like you look at this and you're like, that's a friggin' QR code. And you scan it and it takes you to a video that tells you a sequence of rotations. And I'm like, wait, what? This is some Doki Doki Literature Club ass stuff. And I'm like, I have all these directions. What does that mean exactly? And I had recently encountered the big owl statue whose head turns. And I was like, do I have to rotate the owl that way? Do I need to like go back to the big owl? And I was like, wait, what if I just try rotating in this room?
Right. That's what I would have done.
Yeah. And I tried the sequence. It was a sequence of like 10 directions. And then I got a trophy and I got an anti-cube. And it was my 30-second cube.
Oh, that's so awesome.
And my mouth was agape. It was mind-blowing. It was the perfect cube to have as your 30-second cube because it was so unlike everything else in the game. It was one of my very few anti-cubes. And I felt so smart.
That's awesome.
So I loved that.
That reminds me of another one of those like rotation sequence ones. I found a room where it was music focused, and then if you were paying attention, the beat would trigger vibrations in your controller on either the left side or the right side.
No way.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I was in that room, I think, like 3 or 4 times before that. Didn't notice it at all.
Whoa.
But I knew that I was missing something because the map said I was, and I was just sitting there, and I was like, wait a minute. You know, and I noticed that my hands were feeling different levels of vibration.
Whoa.
So that's the sequence you have to follow, is just paying attention to where the vibration is on your controller.
And see, while that's super cool, I have to wonder if there are lots of those innermost secrets in this game that are just naturally going to be more inaccessible because of the, you know, not everybody's going to be able to scan a QR code right away.
Right.
What happens
Raising my hand, you know.
What happens if they take that video down?
Yeah.
What if that video becomes unavailable? Then I have to look up a guide online, which I'm already accessing the internet, but the question is, how am I accessing the internet? And then like, am I using a controller that has Rumble?
Right. Yeah.
Like, how would that work if you weren't,
well,
if you
and
didn't
I'm
like
playing,
Rumble?
Yeah, I'm playing the PS4 version on PS5. Who says that, you know, that translates correctly to a DualSense when you turn it on?
Maybe it won't. Those things sometimes get missed. So
Yeah.
I have those questions about the longer this game exists, are these things going to be preserved? I hope so.
I in general, I don't like when stuff exists outside of the game itself. Just period for all games.
Yeah. So I'm of 2 minds about it. I think it's really experimental, really fun, really interesting, very different.
It's just risky.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. When it comes to puzzles and mechanics, you know, there are more that I think of. I also think of being in the mines where you have bombs and you use bombs on breakable walls. First, you kind of learn that bombs are used to open doors or maybe like one little spot in the wall that looks like it's broken already. So that's a language we've learned from so many games over the years. But then where FEZ becomes its own thing is you have breakable walls that wrap around a structure,
Mm-hmm.
and you throw a bomb at the first section of this wall and it breaks. And because you're only seeing one of the four sides at any time, if you don't rotate at the right moment, the explosion won't do its chain reaction, if you will. And so I loved following that explosion along the wall and like sort of seeing it spiral up sometimes. I felt like it was sort of a reaction or rhythm game in a way. I loved that idea so much.
Yeah, that stands out as being pretty cool. Okay, so there are deeper layers to this game. Like, what are you curious about? What do you have questions about here? I kind of alluded to it in my review. You have this whole alphabet that you can decipher. I'm glad it's there, but I just don't care. Like, I don't want to sit there and write it all down and try and solve the alphabet.
I think my problem with this is I think I'm one step behind you where I'm not even aware there is an alphabet. Like, I'm missing the piece of knowledge that clues me into there being an alphabet other than I found the writing cube. So that might tell me that I can write things down. And I can recognize that there are symbols and things.
So when you see these like different squares, it's a lot like Bionicle has an alphabet.
Sure.
And a lot of these symbols kind of remind me of the Bionicle alphabet a little bit. You see them all over the place. Like in the first room, there's like symbols on the wall that are the alphabet.
I guess I did notice that. It's just that like, how am I supposed to know where to even begin?
How are you supposed to know where to be? That's kind of my complaint. Like, I do not care to sit there and take the time.
There's also a numerical system apparently, and all of this stems from the zoo folk.
Mm-hmm.
This is ZU, is how you spell it.
Okay.
And there are lots of unsolved puzzles I have in the zoo city.
Tons, yeah.
Yeah, so that's where I'm mostly like wondering about the secrets. There were a couple rooms that I noticed that we both had questions about. There's this one called the Crypt. Again, I'm pulling these names from this interactive map, but the Crypt, do you remember this? This is where it had the grids of what looked like doors, and they resembled some of the map pieces we were finding. And I think you were watching me during this part, and you were like, I tried this for 20 minutes and I couldn't figure it out.
Oh, I think so. It's like 16 doors on each side.
Yes.
I did solve that eventually.
You did?
That's the one I was talking about with the treasure map.
Oh, got it. Okay, so the treasure map was for that.
Yes.
Okay, I tried to use the treasure map and I just didn't. Maybe I didn't have enough info.
Yeah, there are 4 treasure maps that
one for each side.
Yeah, one for each side, and
I didn't have enough.
That's the Mega Man 03 puzzle. That
maybe I came to that conclusion and then I just realized, you know what? I only have 2 of the 4 maps, so I need to come back. And then I never went back.
Yeah,
dang. There's a door behind a waterfall that I couldn't figure out. I think that involves something more big brain than I know how to do.
I think I found that door. I think I solved it.
Okay.
I don't remember if I used a guide or not.
Okay.
But I kind of remember that being one of the ones that's just like, oh, I did it, but I might be wrong about that.
Did you figure out anything with the Tetris shapes?
No,
Okay, there's a whole thing there.
Yeah, and I see a lot of them in the background, and I'm like, I see the Tetrinamos, but I don't.
Is that what they're called?
Nothing. Yeah, I think
Tetrinamos?
Tetrinamo. Let me make sure that's right.
I've never heard that.
Tetrominos.
Tetraminos?
Yeah.
Tetrominos?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I learned something today. Yeah, that feels like a whole area of the game that is just over my head. Like I recognize that that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
I have some of the bricks to a building, but I don't know what the building looks like.
Yeah. I love when you say that. Yeah.
Was this game's like Outer Wilds moment for me. There might also be unsolved parts of this game yet to this day. I'm not sure. There might be like innermost secrets that still haven't been uncovered.
That wouldn't surprise me if FEZ is the kind of game that would have something like that.
I think so. And it inspired lots of games that do a similar thing. We have not played Tunic yet for this show. I'd love to in a season coming to you soon. But I've played Animal Well. I know FEZ is an inspiration for Animal Well partly. And Animal Well has that going on.
Yeah.
Lots
A
of
lot of weird stuff that you kind of know it is a puzzle. You just don't know what it's telling you.
Yeah, sometimes you have to take a leap of faith on a hunch, on an inference, and most of the time you might be wrong. But this is how the community solves these puzzles. But yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else to say about FEZ?
No, I don't think so. I said what I needed to say, which was unfortunately not as much as I had hoped to say. And that's that.
Okay, yeah.
Owl B.
I'm so and there are owls in this game. Wow. It all comes full circle. This was one of those classic indie games that I'm glad we could catch up on.
It is one of those quintessential ones, I think.
Yes, it feels good to have this feather in our cap,
Yep.
if you will.
That's what I wanted out of it, and so we did the thing. I can graduate from high school. I got my credits in.
Well, that's our review of FEZ. You can play it on PC, Mac, Linux, Switch, PS3, PS4, PlayStation Vita, Xbox 360, and iOS. DiscoCola rated it an 8. I rated it an 8.5. That's the end of this episode of Underplayed. You can find more of our episodes at kzum.org/underplayed and on podcast platforms like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Our music was composed by Jack Rodenberg. Our art comes from Oni Mochi. Check out our show notes where you can find and follow us across social media. Underplayed is on Bluesky, Instagram, and Threads. You can also find me in those places, and I stream a variety of indie games on Twitch.
I am at DiscoCola in several places as well, including Backloggd, where I have my top 100 indie games, which now includes Owlboy at 48
Hackers.
and FEZ at 76.
Oh my gosh, hold on. I need to look at my list of top 100 indie games
Okay.
because I think we have FEZ super close.
Pretty much at the same spot.
FEZ for me is at 73.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
That is really close. And Inscription has now moved up to number 8.
Wow, top 10.
Top 10, baby.
Well, since you brought it up, it's my number 15.
Okay. That's actually higher than I thought. So
Yeah.
I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, we should do a check-in on our top 100s maybe at the end of the season or something.
Let's do it. I am so down for that.
Okay, sounds good. Next time, we'll have 2 more secret games to review, and our featured game will be One Shot World Machine Edition, a puzzle adventure game developed by Future Cat LLC. Until then, everyone, keep on playing.